You're listening to the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.
We're in the middle of the 5th chapter. We're going to deal with the question of how you can take title over an object that you can't see and touch. And we've already learned it's a fundamental axiom of civil law in halacha that in order to take title of a movable object, you need to actually pick it up and move it. So title over land is different. Title over land you can transfer with the deed. But title over a movable object has to be passed by picking up the object and moving it. And we're going to deal in this part of the chapter with Maaser Sheni, which has already been designated and separated. So it's already been separated, but it hasn't yet been transferred to its new owner. And of course, the time of removal has arrived. We learnt at the beginning of the chapter that, and we confirmed yesterday, that before the first day of Pesach, on the 3rd year, we have to remove all the holy stuff from our house. We have to give away all the Maaser Sheni that we've designated. So what are we going to do if we are remote? And the Mishnah begins, someone whose produce was far away from him, tzarich likro lahem shem, has to designate it by name, and designate by name those who are going to receive it. And the Mishnah is going to explain how this is going to work, taking the example of the elders who are on a ship. Now, there are famous stories of the elders traveling to Rome to visit the emperor. And maybe this is such an occasion. We don't know. But for whatever reason, there is an occasion when Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yoshua and Rabban Gamliel are all on a ship. They're all traveling somewhere. This is probably the famous journey to Rome. And the time comes towards the first day of Pesach, and they need to hand out their Maaser Sheni, which they've already separated and designated. And the Mishnah explains, it just so happened that Rabban Gamliel and the elders were going in a ship. So this is what they're going to do. Amar Rabban Gamliel, Asor shani atid lamud natun li Hoshua. The tithe which I am going to measure out in the future. In other words, I've already designated, but I'm going to measure it out to its recipients. Natun li Hoshua umukomo muskarlo. It's given to Joshua. Now, Joshua is a Levi, right? It's always good to travel with a Levi if you want to get rid of your Maaser. It's given to Joshua, and its location is leased to him. So Joshua can't pick up the Maaser, which he's going to take possession of, but he's going to rent the place where it's at. So he's actually going to take possession of the location where it's at, and by that means, he's going to take possession of the commodity. This works, by the way, in French law as well. If you own the place where the commodity is sitting, you can own the commodity. And then he goes on. Asur acher shani atid lamod, a different tithe which I'm going to measure out in future. Natzun la'akiva ben Yosef sheziskebo la'anyim u mukomo muskarlo. Akiva is in charge of the funds for the poor. So the second tithe which I'm going to measure out, and this is Maaser ani, Maaser for the poor, I'm going to give to Akiva ben Yosef, and I'm going to lease him the place where it's sitting. And now, Rabbi Yoshua, who's received the first tithe, the tithe for the Levi, he comes in and says, Asor shani atid lamod, the tithe which I'm going to give, and remember, he has to give Trumat Maaser. He has to give 10% of the 10% to a Kohen. Asor shani atid lamod, the tithe which I'm going to hand out, natun le'Elazar ben Azariah, who, thank heavens, is a Kohen. Always travel, by the way, with a Kohen and a Levi if you need to go anywhere. Umukomo muskarlo, and its place is rented to him. Venit kablu ze mize sachar, and they took rent one from the other. So that's how they fulfill their obligations the day before the first day of Pesach. They've given away all of the Maaser Sheni, and the Maaser actually, which needs to be taken out of the house. And then they're ready to make the confession. And we learnt, we actually read the pasuk last Shabbat. I'm just going to remind you now. The pasuk says, "Ve'amarta lifnei Hashem Elohecha, bi'arti hakodesh min habayit." You shall say before God, I have removed the holy stuff from the house, and I've given them to the Levi and the stranger, the orphan and the widow. K'chol mitzvatcha asher tzivitani. This is the confession. It's called Vidui Maaser, the confession of the Maaser. And the Mishnah in Sota, the first Mishnah in the 7th chapter of Sota, gives a list of things that you have to recite. D'oraita. These are biblical commands to recite. And the Mishnah is going to explain which can be recited in any language and which can be recited in Hebrew, which have to be recited in Hebrew. And it's very interesting that the Vidui Maaser comes among the things which can be recited in any language, like the Shema, like the Tefillah. Elu nemorim b'chol hashon, Parshat Sota, that's the connection with Sota. Vidui Maaser, it's the first on the list. And then Kriyat Shema, Utfilah, Birkat HaMazon. All of these things can be recited in any language. So how are we going to make the Vidui Maaser? Well, the Mishnah continues back to Maaser Sheni. B'mincha b'yom tov, acharon hayu mitvadin. This is the mincha on the last festival day. This is the last festival day of Pesach. So we've got rid of everything from our house before the first day of Pesach. Mincha on the last day, we're going to make the confession. Keitzad hayu havidui. How does it work? Bi'arti hakodesh min habayit. I've got everything out of the house. This refers to Maaser Sheni and, by the way, the fruit of plants in their 4th year. Remember, we began this chapter with plants which are in their 4th year, which are not orla anymore, but they aren't edible either. You have to eat them in Jerusalem. Netativ la Levi. Remember, the text says vegam netativ, and the Mishnah says just netativ. Netativ la Levi. Ze Maaser Levi. This is the first Maaser which goes to a Levi. The Mishnah doesn't quote the word vegam, and also because it's going to drush that differently. Vegam netativ. Now we're going to drush the vegam. Vegam netativ. Zo truma utrumat Maaser. This is truma and trumat Maaser which goes to a kohen. Lager la yatom v'la amana ze Maaser aniv. To the stranger, the orphan and the widow, this refers to the tithes of the poor. This is a lot, actually. Ze Maaser ani haleket v'hashichra v'hapea afal pi she'enan ma'akvinat havidui. This refers to everything that we give to the poor, even though the gleanings and the forgotten sheaves and the corners of the field aren't actually necessary for the vidui. And then min habayit, the last words of the confession, min habayit, from the house. This refers to challah. And challah is actually the next masechet in the tractate of Zeraim. So the next masechet we're going to go to is challah. And the confession goes on. This part is now just a straight quotation from the halachic midrash, the Sifrei on Devarim. K'chol mitzvatcha asher tzivitani, according to all the commandments which you commanded. That refers to taking Maaser Sheni. If you take Maaser Sheni before the first tithe, you can't make the confession. Remember, we learnt the hierarchy of tithes. And Maaser, the first Maaser, which goes to Levi, comes before Maaser Sheni. Lo avarti mimitzvotecha velo hifrash. Lo avarti mimitzvotecha. That means lo hifrashti mimin al she'eno min. I haven't set aside one kind for a different kind. We learned all of these halachot at the beginning of Masrot. We can't take maaser from one kind for a different kind, or from food which is plucked for food joined to the soil, or the other way around, from joined to the soil for plucked, or new for old, or old for new. We learned all these halachot at the beginning of the tractate of Masrot. And we're now going to remember them as we explain the vidui. And then velo shechachti, finally, velo shechachti, lo shechachti mi levarachecha, I haven't forgotten to bless you, umi lehaskir shimcha alav, I haven't forgotten to bless you or to mention your name over it. In other words, this whole, we recite a bracha when we take Maaser. We don't do this blindly, but we do it thoughtfully. And again, we're recalling the first things that we learned at the beginning of the tractate in Masrot, that intention and thought are absolutely critical to separation of Maaser. Now, we're stopping in the middle of the explanation of the vidui. Tomorrow we'll learn the last, so we're getting very close to the end of the tractate and the end of the chapter. And tomorrow we will just finish off learning about the text of the vidui and how it relates back to the Mishnah. But I'll stop here for now.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.